So good evening. My name is Jerry Williams, and I am the founder and president of Myositis Support and Understanding. And we are a 501c3 patient-centered volunteer nonprofit organization. And today we are focusing on care partners and the topic of forgiveness. Now, I know that there's also myositis patients that are joining us today, and maybe even some of our supporters that don't really have a family connection to myositis, but you're welcome to watch and participate, and we're glad to have you. Just a quick note, we do encourage questions. There is a Q&A icon in your Zoom toolbar. If you click that Q&A icon, you can type your questions, and you can do that at any time during the webinar, and then we'll get to those once Janet is finished with her talk. So just to introduce Janet, we're just so very thankful to have her join us today. Janet has over 30 years of experience in the health promotion field. She retired in May 2007 as the director of the prevention and wellness at Blue Cross Blue Shield of Massachusetts. And since retirement, she, as president of JME Insights, she is also a motivational speaker, consultant, and trainer. While working full-time, Janet took care of her husband, Charles, during the 5 years that he fought a movement disorder with dementia, which she wrote in her book, Finding Meaning with Charles. Janet has a master's degree from Georgia State University, and we do have a link for more information about Janet and the work that she does that we'll post in the chat section. So without further ado, I would like to welcome Janet. Hi, Janet. Thanks for joining us today.
Hi, it's great to be here. Thank you. I'm going to share my screen here. Let's get that going.
Great.
Welcome, everybody. Here we go. I just want to say, too, that I feel very fortunate to be here because Jerry and I were lucky to sit next to each other at the Myositis conference and got to meet each other. So I am just happy that now I'm here to share with you some of my information, and it was all because Jerry and I had a wonderful time having lunch, I think it was breakfast, I think.
It was.
All right, so we're here to talk about the power of forgiveness. What an important topic. Let me start, first of all, telling you a little bit about my late husband, Charles. I'll show you some pictures of him in just a sec, but he did have this atypical Parkinsonian disorder, which was a movement disorder, had some cognitive issues with it, and it progressed over 5 years. He was 45 with his first symptom. He died at the age of 50, and that was in the year 2000. But what I wanted to share with you first, because I am going to share a challenge that we had, but I want to share with you a little bit about our relationship. I was Charles's second wife, and we were married 20 years before he died. He would always tell me I was the best thing that ever happened to him. So that made me feel just terrific, right? And then as his disease started to progress, he started adding words to that till he had his own little poem. And I'm going to recite it to you right now. He said, and he would do this, he would say it to me every night when we would go to bed. I love my Janet, my pretty little gentle Janet. The love of my life is Janet, my wife. I love you so, 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 so much multiplied. I'm very proud of the person you are. The best thing that ever happened to me is you. Now, he typed that out and signed it with his squiggly handwriting at the time, and I had that posted in my office, even though I have since remarried. But that's just a precious memory for me. And I say that to you because I do know that Charles truly did love me. And even into the first year or two of the disease was when he wrote that poem. But we were going to have a challenge. As the disease progressed, we were going to have some things that would go on. So it started with, now part of his disease had some cognitive issues. Not Alzheimer's with memory, but more behavioral types of issues. So it started out with him saying to any female nurse or aide, I love you. And it was really cute. But then a little later on, he came to me and he said one night, I love Deedee. Now, this is a picture of Deedee, but that's not her name, and she doesn't want me to share who she is. But this is Deedee. Charles is fairly long. This is probably 4 years into his 5-year progression. So what do I do with that? He says he loves Deedee. I knew that diseases like this can produce some behavioral issues and some losing of your filters in your brain. So I knew it was the disease, but still it hurt. And it was something that I had to come to grips with in regard to how do I deal with this. But I was totally determined to be the best caregiver I could, give Charles the best rest of life as possible. I was his key to that, and we were not going to stop. Charles was a phenomenal man. People loved him. He was vice president at a small company, and they just adored him. And everything I could tell you so much about him. He was just a terrific guy. So there was no way I was going to impact that because I was hurt. However, I realized that I still needed to forgive him, and that would help me to move on and let go. Now, interesting, you might be saying, well, isn't forgiveness really for someone who intentionally wrongs you? And that truly is the definition of forgiveness. And Charles wasn't intentionally wronging me. This was the disease, and I knew it was the disease. However, another component of forgiveness is letting go. And I needed to let go of that hurt, let go of how I felt, and take control for myself about our relationship, and to keep remembering the I Love My Janet poem, which I know he said before the disease totally impacted his ability to think clearly. So I want you to think about, are you holding on to any grudges? Think about who that might be with. Is it with a loved one? With a family member? Maybe it's a friend, a long lost friend, with an acquaintance. Sometimes we have things happening just with people who aren't totally important to our lives, but you know, something bad happens. And then with strangers. Strangers can tick us off too. So determine, first of all, if you have a grudge, and think about whether you find yourself telling the story that happened over and over in your mind. I'm going to be repeating this, but if you're telling the story that happened over in your mind, you're holding a grudge. And if you're holding a grudge, like many of us do this, I hope you can benefit from what we're going to talk about today. So what gets us to the point of pain, to where this grudge and this offense gives us pain? According to Fred Luskin, and I'm going to explain who he is in a little bit, he says it includes 3 things: the exaggerated taking of personal offense, the blaming of the offender for how we feel, and the creation of a grievance story, the story that we tell ourselves. That gets us to the point of this now being painful. And by then focusing too much on our disappointment, we end up renting too much of our space in our mind to this hurt. So our brain can only hold so much, and if we're putting a lot of these stories and hurt in there, it's taking up time where we could use that for positivity. So that's an important reason to want to deal with and learn about forgiveness. So Fred Luskin and also his colleague Carl Thorensen wrote, "A grudge is a gift that keeps on giving. Misery, that is." Whoops. So holding a grudge or a grievance works against us, and we often ruminate on that grudge. Rumination is the capacity of our mind to endlessly dwell on things that went wrong. It's sort of a protective mechanism that's gone awry. So we want to protect ourselves from the bad, but then when we ruminate, we get mental grooves. I think of this like a record. We get mental grooves in our brain that get etched there deeper and deeper the more this story goes over in our brain. And just because bad things happen doesn't mean that we have to dwell on them. We don't have to repeat this grievance story. Ruminating takes up a lot of brain capacity and energy. While we are ruminating, we then don't have the capacity and the energy to focus, as I said, on the good things, on the positives, on the good fortunes that we've had. We would be better off if we gave up on that thief of rumination and allow our brains to focus more on the good in our lives. That's a bottom line message today. Missing the beauty in our lives is an unanticipated damage that the grievances can create. So before we go to talk about what is forgiveness and how to apply it, let's review what forgiveness is not. These and much of the material in this webinar is from Fred Luskin. I wanted to take a moment now and introduce him to you. So I have his book there in the very bottom corner, Forgive for Good. He's at Stanford University and is a co-founder and director of the Stanford Forgiveness Project. He's often on TV stations, podcasts, etc., talking about forgiveness. This is his topic. So he says, these things are not forgiveness. Forgiveness is not condoning unkindness. So we're not condoning it. When we talk about forgiveness, we are not saying that what the other person did was right. That's an important message. Forgiveness does not mean that you have to think that what happened was okay. The next thing that forgiveness is not is forgetting that something painful happened. We don't have to forget. We're going to talk about forgetting in just a little bit. Forgiveness is not focusing on poor behavior. Excusing poor behavior. Forgiving doesn't mean that it's okay for people to treat us unkindly. However, by forgiving, you might fear that their poor behavior will continue toward you if you forgive them. If I forgive this person, they'll keep doing the bad behavior. A way to minimize that would be to tell them the consequences if they do it again. Forgiveness is not denying or minimizing your hurt. Anger and hurt are appropriate responses to painful events. We don't have to be a doormat in order to forgive. We're going to feel the hurt. Forgiveness is not needing to reconcile with the offender. So there may be times where it's important to reconcile. We're going to talk about that in a minute. But sometimes we don't need to. There are times where we don't need to. And forgiveness is not giving up on your feelings. So forgiveness isn't really about the offender at all. All right, it's not about the offender. Instead, it's about letting go of the anger that eats at you, accepting what you were wronged, but deciding to move on from the hurt. So what is forgiveness? And what can we do about it? According to Fred Luskin, forgiveness is for you and not the offender. Forgiveness is taking back your power. Forgiveness is the powerful assertion that bad things will not ruin your today, even though they may have spoiled your past. Let me tell you about a personal story. This doesn't have anything to do with my caregiver experience, but another personal story in regard to learning more about forgiveness in my own life. This is my friend Cheryl, and we worked together and been good friends for quite some time. And Cheryl and I worked for 2 years for a woman, and I'm going to call her Debbie. That's not her name. Debbie was initially a benevolent leader, and it was a small company, and we loved working for her the first year that I was there. She was terrific. Then we found out that we were going to lose our largest client, and not because of anything we did, but because they merged with another client that offered, and that other entity had a service like what we did, so that we were going to lose that opportunity. So starting at that point, Debbie became a bully and a witch. And Cheryl and I would be on the phone almost every night for at least an hour talking about what happened, how she was bullied, how other things were happening with other staff people. We would just go on and on and on and on. Well, this just really created those grooves, right? The story that we were doing created the grooves. And I realized that this was hurting me, not Debbie. Debbie had no idea we felt this way or that we were ruminating over this so much. This was hurting me. What gave me some real insight was when I read the book by Jeffrey Archer called Cain, K-A-N-E, and Abel. I don't know if you've read that book. It's a great book. And it has two people from different countries that end up coming together in a way, but they've always hated each other throughout their intersections throughout life. And the book has their kids marrying each other, but because of their hatred, they never see their grandchild because that hatred is so deep. I read that book and I realized, whoa, what a bad response for not forgiving. And I realized that not forgiving was hurting each of them, each of those characters. So I realized that for me, I needed to let go of this grievance towards Debbie. Now, I never saw Debbie. I never tried to reconcile. I moved on in my work and life. She did something different in her work and life. But I let it go. And there was a huge weight that came off of me, and I didn't have to go through that rumination. You know, when it just works you up. She was toxic for me, and I was able to let that go, and I got back some sanity and peace from that. So we have lots of opportunities to forgive. Let me go through some examples. So here's an easy one. When we're in a big traffic situation on the freeway, and someone pulls in front of us, right? Oh boy, we can get mad at that, right? That's a little thing in life, but it still affects us. We can just forgive the person, move on. We don't know what kind of day that person had or what their situation was and why they cut us off. It probably wasn't because they want to do something mean to us, right? So let it go. Another opportunity to forgive is when our loved one or someone close to us says something hurtful to us, or makes an untrue accusation. That's an opportunity where we really need to think about how to forgive, how to work through the reconciliation as well. Another opportunity might be a close friend or family member that doesn't want to visit you, the person with myositis, or if you're a care partner, doesn't want to visit your loved one with myositis. And this happens sometimes. Some of your family members won't come, your good friends stop coming. This happened with us, with Charles, not with everybody, but with a number of people. And I was so mad and angry, but it was an opportunity to forgive. There was something within them that made it difficult for them to come by. And I had to open myself up to understanding that. I didn't have to like it. I didn't have to, say it was okay, but just let it go. And another opportunity to forgive is when someone lies to you. So why is forgiveness so difficult? Well, here are some potential reasons. Forgiveness can be difficult because we get stuck in that story we told ourselves, right? Forgiveness can be difficult because as long as we maintain a picture of the other's villainy and our own virtue, right, we feel morally justified in our anger and frustration. I bet that many of you can relate to that. Another reason that forgiveness is difficult is because sometimes we take delight in the suffering of the person who harmed us, right? Or maybe another reason it's difficult is perhaps we reason this mutual misery will help them see the error of their ways and become a better human being, right? We want to teach them a lesson. That's kind of the way I was with that Debbie, that boss that I had, until I realized I got to let that go. Joan Borensenko, in an article in Prevention magazine, after explaining a trivial argument with her mother that her mother actually had with her mother's best friend. So the mother had this argument with her best friend, and it tore those two people apart for decades. Joan said, Buddha would say that my mother's resentment was like a hot coal. She picked it up to throw it at someone else. She was the one that got burned. So think about that again. Not forgiving another is usually hurting us, not so much the other person. That's why we need to forgive, for us. What about apologies that we hear? Dr. Luskin and others suggest that you first don't wait for an apology before you forgive. Second, sometimes the person who hurt you isn't even aware that he's done so, right? They hurt us, but it's not important to them. They didn't even understand that they did that, so they're not going to apologize because they didn't know that they did something. Another reason is, in other cases, she might be incapable of understanding or caring. And the fourth reason is the simple word, I'm sorry, can be healing, but so is deciding that you no longer need to hear it. So we like to hear the word, I'm sorry, but maybe we'll be past that we don't even have to hear it. All right, I kind of teed this one up. Do we forgive and forget? Mr. Kabir, in his article, says, quote, it's always wise to forgive and forget, is it? He suggests that the answer may be yes in some cases and no in others. And so let's look at this chart. If the relationship is important, see that axis going up, and the apology is sincere, see the horizontal bar, it's best to both forgive and forget. Then you can focus on rebuilding the relationship and develop a plan on how to avoid this from happening again. So person A on this chart, that's yes, we need to forgive, we need to forget, we need to reconcile. However, for an important relationship where you've received an insincere apology or no apology, like person B on my chart, forgiveness is still necessary, but the inability to do so keeps us trapped in rumination and limits our ability to think clearly or act in appropriate ways. But forgetting may put us at risk of being hurt again. To deal with this, you may need to help create healthy boundaries for yourself. And at the other end of the spectrum, person C down there, when you get an insincere apology from another person who is someone you'll hardly ever meet again, or whom you really don't have any intention of becoming meaningfully having a relationship with them, just forgive and forget and move on. This will help free you up that important space in your mental energy for other important things. Dr. Luskin's scientific research on forgiveness has shown some terrific and important health benefits of forgiveness. People who practice forgiveness experience lower blood pressure and heart rate. This is pretty good stuff. Reduced levels of depression, anxiety, and anger. They have more and better relationships with others. They feel happier and more hopeful. That's what we all want to feel, right? Especially if we're dealing with such a big disease as myositis. We need to feel hopeful. We don't need the lack of forgiveness to pull us down. And we may feel more emotionally strong, with more confidence and optimism. And we're going to score higher on just about every measure of psychological well-being. And there's more. In addition to those health benefits, forgiveness, some more benefits will be that we're not going to be victims of our past. It's going to allow us to self-regulate, using the process to quiet down a bit with all of the stress and time pressures. When we get rid of that grudge, we can regulate better. It allows us to move on. And if we don't let go, it affects us. It's going to affect our nervous system, our biological system, as well as reduce our sense of happiness and joy. One another benefits of forgiveness, it's good for long-term relationships. You all know that. If we're not forgiving and holding grudges, that's not good. It allows us to give more love and care to the people that are important to us. And allows us to move on when caregiving, when challenges emerge in our caregiving or in our relationship with our loved one. So, many of you have heard this quote from Alexander Pope, the 18th century English poet. Good nature and good sense must ever join. To err is human, to forgive divine. So, how do we do this thing called forgiveness? Here are two overarching thoughts. One is you got to grieve. The other is you got to let go. So let's talk about grieving first. Recognize that your primary distress is coming from the hurt feelings, the thoughts, the physical upset you are suffering now about it. Not from what offended you or hurt you 2 minutes ago, or 10 minutes ago, or 10 years ago, or who knows however long ago, right? It's this distress you're facing now because you haven't been able to forgive. Grieving after you have been wronged means letting yourself feel the anger, hurt, and trauma in its original pain, but not indefinitely. So at some point, grieving is just feeling it, and then we go to step 2, which is to let it go. And letting go, it first helps to realize that life isn't fair. Bad things will happen. People will hurt us. However, instead of ruminating on our grievance story, start to replace negative mental grooves with forgiveness. So let's look at some examples of grudges. My loved one yelled at me. My ex is a bum. My parents are not ideal. My mother harmed me. I mean, we could go on and on. Forgiveness says, yes, they might have harmed you, but it's a brand new day. So let go of the grooves and the negativity and practice skills of forgiveness. By forgiving your transgressor, you take back control of your life. You let go of the anger and the hurt by being mindful and focusing on gratitude and kindness. Granted, all of this takes courage and commitment. But one proactive way that you can let go is to focus on gratitude. I know you all have heard about the importance of gratitude. It's all over, the popular news. But for us, in regard to forgiveness, it's a good counter to the hurt. So putting more energy into gratitude can really help. So it's an and thing. So I might have had crappy parents, and I have these other good things, right? And you can say those good things. I may have yelled at my loved one, or they may have yelled at me, and we still love each other dearly, okay? So one thing you can do with gratitude is think of 5 things every day at the end of the day that you're grateful for. Jot them down, talk about them with your loved one, or start the morning off thinking about what you're grateful for and send a note to someone. So these are proactive things we can do to counterbalance that negativity of forgiveness. Acknowledge what you wanted. Think about what desires you had with that person that you have this grievance with. You may have wanted a different life. You may not have wanted this stress. You desire to have a great partner, but something went wrong, etc., etc. We tend to complain when desires are different from reality. Give up expecting things from other people that you don't choose to give yourself. Remind yourself that you can hope for health, love, friendship, and prosperity, and work hard to get them. However, you will suffer when you demand these things occur with certain people, since you don't have the power to make them happen. We don't have control over the other people. We have control over us. So our next tip to gain for forgiveness and what it's going to do and how we do it is it's going to give us some self-insight. What are relationships And responsibilities. What are these responsibilities for the grudges? Oftentimes, we may not want to acknowledge our responsibilities for creating grudges. We want to blame it on the other person, right? Not us. So first off, recognize that everyone is flawed, including you, including me. Then ask yourself, how much forgiveness have you required for people to be in relationship with you? Use some humble truth telling about yourself, such as, wow, if so-and-so can tolerate me, then I need to tolerate others. Another self-insight is to remember that feeling hurt does not automatically mean that someone meant to hurt you, right? They may not even know that they did, as I said. Also, when you blame someone else for your suffering, you believe that someone else is the cause of your pain. Then you need something from him or her to feel better. That is only granting the other person the power to regulate your emotions. Blaming just keeps you stuck. That may only make you feel helpless and wait for their apology in vain. Many times the other person may have already moved on. Remember that a life well lived is your best revenge. Instead of focusing on your wounded feelings and thereby giving power over you to the person who caused your pain, learn to look for the love, beauty, and kindness within and around you. Get that self-insight. And another tip is to look for another way to get your positive goals met than through the experience that has hurt you. Your loved one may not be able to give you what you need, but think about what your ultimate personal and life goals are and proactively look for other ways you can find what will help you accomplish those important goals apart from the people that hurt you. So, how can we move on to learn this forgiveness? I encourage you to practice on people and things that are a little bit easy, not quite so intense as important relationships. Practice there. So things like traffic, like we said, someone cutting in front of you. Practice letting go. Practice forgiveness with that. If you make a mistake, practice forgiving yourself, or if someone else makes a mistake, practice forgiving that. Some little things. Inconveniences, or maybe a rude customer experience, right? You're a customer and the person, the representative or whatever, wasn't the way you thought they should be. That's the time to practice forgiveness, right? If we practice here, we're going to build our forgiveness muscle. And if we practice on these small little slights to us without lashing out or swearing or giving the finger or whatever, you'll give a gift to everyone. So that's something that can be a very positive way to move forward. Let's build that forgiveness muscle. Another tip to get better at forgiveness is to develop a forgiving mind through empathy. Scientists have studied what happens in our brain when we think about forgiving, and they have discovered that when people successfully imagine forgiving someone, in a hypothetical situation, of course, they show increased activity in the neural circuits of the brain responsible for empathy. This tells us that empathy is connected to forgiveness and is an important step in that process. If you examine some of the details in the life of the person you harmed, who harmed you, you can often see more clearly what wounds he carries or she carries and start to develop empathy. One way to try to do this is to imagine this person as an innocent child, needing love and support. Did this person get that from their parents? Maybe not. Research has shown that if an infant does not receive attention and love from primary caregivers, then they will have a weak attachment, which can damage trust. And it may prevent them from ever getting close to others. And that sets a trajectory of loneliness and conflict for the rest of their life. So that's just one example of having empathy for someone. So many ways that we can try to get into someone else's shoes who hurt us. What might have been what they were thinking, feeling, seeing, hearing, saying at that time that may have caused them to lash out at us or do something that hurt us. There might be some real deep reasons for that we're not even aware of until we put this empathy to play. The next tip in practicing forgiveness is to be kind to yourself as you work toward forgiveness. First, remember that if you are struggling with forgiveness, that doesn't mean you're a failure at forgiveness. Forgiveness is a process that takes time, patience, and determination. Try not to be harsh on yourself, but be gentle and foster a sense of quiet within, an inner acceptance of yourself. Try to respond to yourself as you would to someone who you deeply love. This is called self-compassion. We want to give ourselves the same compassion we would give if a friend came to us and talked about a similar grievance or problem. Surround yourself with good and wise people who support you and who have the patience to allow you time to heal in your own way. Practice humility, not in the sense of putting yourself down, but in realizing that we are all capable of imperfection and suffering. So let's just be humble about that. Try to develop courage and patience in yourself to help you in the journey. In short, forgive yourself. Finally, forgive for love. As an ABC News story once shared, dance with the one you brought. You choose your partner, faults and all. Let your partner know how blessed you are. Love is a gift which your partner is giving. See your loved one's flaws and failures with loving eyes. Give the benefit of the doubt. We always seem to jump to negative intentions, to bad intentions. I say jump to good intentions before you get those grievances going. Assume the best. Acknowledge that they've got flaws just like you do, and strive to see those good intentions. Accept what you can't change. And that's what you got to grieve. If you can't change something that's just there, you've got to grieve that. Choose to recommit and give yourself a break. You are just as flawed and need a good dose of TLC too, as we were just saying with that self-compassion. Let me leave you with this final thought from Fred Luskin. We have such short time on this planet. We might as well enjoy it. And we'll be able to enjoy our life so much better if we learn to forgive others and forgive ourselves. And with that, I'd like to open it up to questions. And I want to say thank you so much for listening.
Janet, thank you so much. That is just so powerful and so much information.
It was a lot.
No, and that's great. I don't mean that in a, as you would say, it was a positive intention, good intention that I said that.
Oh, I know.
And thankfully, for those of you attending, this is recorded, so it will be available to watch again. And if you have any questions, please, while I'm talking, feel free to enter them into the Q&A. But I would like to just say that, it must have been so difficult to hear your husband saying that about another woman, that, he loves her. And the fact that you were able to understand and, that it was the disease, and then ultimately, forgive that is truly amazing. And now that you're sharing all of this with everyone else, I think it's just such a wonderful thing that you're doing. And I can't thank you enough. You had mentioned one part about, people that no longer come around and forgiving them. And, I have a very good friend of mine that I actually went to prom with her, and, we grew up kind of together. And, she always tells me, I just can't bear to see you like you are. So that's why I no longer contact you. And, I've had a really hard time with that, and I've yet to forgive her. So I'm going to use some of these tools and, try to do that.
Jerry, that is not uncommon. I bet a lot of people listening here who have myositis have experienced that. We certainly experienced it. And I've talked to so many groups, all kinds of groups over the years, and I often hear this, and it hurts, especially when these are close people. And I've even heard it in families where there are, if it's a parent that's got a disease, sometimes the kids can't bear it and come around. I do have a story about that. Charles was on hospice at the time, and at that point he was struggling to be able to speak. And there were a lot of people that would continue to come and visit him because he was very loved. But when he couldn't speak anymore very well, it was hard to understand him. It was struggle. You're almost having a one-way conversation. People stopped coming. And I was really hurt about that because I knew people was everything for Charles. And if people stopped coming, I worried about how he would do. So I was going to get ready and do a campaign and guilt them all to coming. And I was going to send them letters. I was going to follow up. I was going to really push. But one day there had been a volunteer from hospice that had spent the time with Charles just before I got home from work. And I was telling this volunteer that had just spent 2 hours with Charles. I said, I really am struggling with the fact that Charles's friends aren't here, so I'm so thankful for you hospice volunteers that are now becoming his friends. And he said, Janet, I totally understand. He said, I have no problem coming and spending 2 hours with Charles, but I never knew him. He said, I've got a friend that has MS. He and there were 4 of us that were friends in high school, friends all through college, close friends. We played cards every week. And he said, he said at that point when I was talking to this guy, he said, if I have seen this guy in the last 6 weeks, I'm lucky. And he said, I feel so guilty about it. And I realized that like your friend, Jerry, and like these friends of Charles's, like this hospice volunteers friends, there's something that's keeping them from coming, whether it's time, whether it's, as she said, it's hard for them to see you failing, whatever their reason is. That's their weakness. And I was able at that point just to say, okay, I'm not going to do my campaign. I am going to celebrate the people that keep coming. I'm going to celebrate the new people in Charles's life. And that's what I can do positively, and just kind of let those other people go. And that's what I had to do.
Thank you for sharing that. It's a really good response, and it's a great story because you're right. I mean, it does happen to a lot of us, and thanks for sharing that. Yeah. Now, question.
So you don't have to condone what she's doing and how it's hurting you, but you can forgive so that you can let go of that hurt yourself.
Yeah. And it's
her weakness.
And like you said, forgiveness is for us, right?
Yeah.
That's the main purpose of it. And it has all those health benefits and emotional benefits.
Exactly. Yeah.
Now, let me ask you a different question. For those of us that are patients, and I don't mean to put you on the spot, but do you have any tips on how we as patients can better be there for our care partners and spouses and things that we can do to ensure that we're not just saying thank you, but we're actually being thankful? Do you have anything that maybe comes to mind?
Well, definitely. First of all, I would say saying thank you is really terrific. Charles lost his ability to be out, to understand, have any empathy to anybody else. That's part of his disease. He totally did. That was his superpower. But with this disease, it was taken away, and he wasn't able to feel empathy towards me. He was all in his own world. And I'm sure with your myositis, especially when things are not going well, it's hard for you to be outside yourself, and that's okay. You're dealing with some, pretty yucky stuff. So that's okay. But saying thank you, let me tell you, is really, really wonderful. But also just gratitude, being specific, saying, I really appreciate that you did this, and really spell it out that you did this, this, and this today for me. Or maybe it's something, big out there. I really appreciate that you stick with me, even, like this other friend didn't, but like you're sticking with me. So there's a lot of ways to say thank you and mean it and be sincere about it. But the main thing when you say thank you is to be authentic and be sincere and be as specific as you can. But just at least saying thank you says you're not acknowledging them.
Great, thank you. Let's see, we don't have any questions in the Q&A. We do have a comment. Forgiveness is essential for healing physically, emotionally. Our bodies impacted by unresolved conflict, pain, anger, resentment. Fantastic presentation, one of the best that she has heard. Thankful for bringing purpose to your pain. So,
oh, that's a terrific comment.
Yes, it really was. So you should feel very proud. You should be very proud of what you're doing.
Thank you.
Thank you. I had posted in the comments earlier, Janet, that I had recently started a gratitude journal.
Yeah.
So Kathy just commented that it sounds like maybe something that she wants to do.
There's a lot of research. There's a lot of research on doing that. So I think if people could do that, it gets your brain on those positive waves. And that really helps getting out of the negativity, which is what not forgiving brings us down to. So I love that idea to do a gratitude journal.
Yeah. And Jerry, I think it's important to kind of highlight what Kathy was saying to the panelists. It's her anger is directed toward her body.
Yes.
And so that's a struggle that unfortunately is a little bit different than the anger that's expressed outward to somebody, because that means you've got to really come to terms with yourself. And
your body is
comment on that a little bit.
Yeah, your body's failing you, and there's nothing you can do about it. And myositis, Charles had a Parkinsonian type disorder, which is different, but nonetheless, you're still dealing with your body not doing what you want it to do. And what I've heard by so many neurologists is be mad at the disease, not your loved one, and I would say not yourself. So be mad at, I think myositis is the one to put darts up at. Be mad at the myositis, but you can't be mad at yourself. Don't be mad at yourself, because this is not something you can control. But I think being mad at the myositis is certainly acceptable. However, if you dwell there, you're not getting into any of that positive, right? That's a grievance story. So how do you flip out of that? Gratitude, look at the positives, moving forward with positive relationships, things that you can, looking at what you can still do, looking at what your body is still able to do. Those are all, I'm not minimizing how bad it can be, but I can tell you absolutely 100%, no matter how bad it is, there are still positives around you. So we have to proactively look for those positives. They're not going to just pop right out. We got to search for them, look for them. When we see them, we need to savor them. It could be that the positives that you see in the course of the day is just a beautiful sunset. We'll take it, hold on to it, savor that. So find those ways to counteract that anger that you have towards your body failing with myositis. It just is. And it brings me to the serenity prayer, to, accept the things, what is the, know what you can change. I know it. It's in my book, but, know the things that you can change those, but the things you can't change, accept.
Right.
And I think just really holding on to that serenity prayer, and I encourage everybody to post it somewhere. so that we know what we have control over. We'll do something about that. But what you don't have control over, you need to accept it. And one thing that Charles and I were very lucky for us to be able to go to a mind-body program. It was put on by Herbert Benson's group. He was a cardiologist in Boston that did a lot of research on the relaxation. His book was called The Relax, etc. So we were able to be in his workshop, not by him, but one of his trainers. And we were in one for people that had medical problems. So Charles had his, some had Parkinson's, some had, MS. I mean, just a whole set of different kinds of issues. And the very first day, her name was Peg. Peg said, you all have these diseases. You need to accept that you have these. And then she said, but the way to accept them is to make meaning out of them. That's hard, and that's kind of a big thought. But where do you find meaning in your life with myositis? Those of you that are care partners, where do you find meaning in your life with your partner that has myositis? Where is that meaning still? Is it, Jerry, doing these webinars and educating, right? For other people, it's giving to your family or doing something, some other thing that's important to you. But where do you find your meaning? That is how you can get to acceptance, is by making meaning. It's kind of heavy. It's kind of something you have to mull over a bit.
Yeah. Yes, I believe, Richard, did you have a question?
Yes, and more of a comment, and I just wanted to say that I thought you did a fantastic job. The presentation was very positive and a lot of good strategies. One of the things, I thought I'd share a couple of things that have worked for me, and I've been an IBMer about close to 10 years, I guess, close to 79, but one of the things that happens is I often think about, the emphasis on gratitude is well placed. I'm thinking, gosh, I'm pretty lucky compared to some of the other folks that, I have as friends that are really having some real difficulty with their lives and what's been dealt them. And I'm thinking of friends that have had ALS and terminal cancer. And so there are so many people out there worse. And I'm thinking, if I'm dealt IBM, I think with all the other things that I could have been dealt, I'm kind of a lucky guy. And the other strategy that works, I think, is volunteering, and just whether it's calling people that are lonely or that just need somebody to befriend them. That's when you're giving like that, you're getting, and so the more you can give, the more you get, and so those two strategies kind of work for me. Kind of, I guess, deferring the IBM and thinking, it could be a lot worse. And if I'm talking to this person and I can make a difference in their life, and it because they always give you the positive feedback. By the way, I'm a retired counselor, and I suppose that's where some of that comes from. But those two things are really, they make a noticeable difference in the quality of my life. So I just throw that out there.
So Richard, that giving and volunteering, that is your meaning. And that's how you're accepting all of this.
Right. It's almost like a kind of a ministry for me. And it's working, particularly during these times with the pandemic around us. People are feeling isolated more than ever. And so this is a really critical time and a great opportunity for us to maybe try to make a difference. But again, the giving is really getting, so I guess it's selfish that I'm doing this in a way, because I know I'm going to get some pretty good feedback, but it's a great strategy and it works. So I think if people have an opportunity to reach out to somebody that's less fortunate than they themselves are, it'll make a huge difference.
Oh, that's lovely. Be selfish. Go for it.
Absolutely.
When you think you got so much else on your plate, be selfish on that front.
Yeah.
Yeah,
But
giving
thank you.
feels good. Giving feels good. So
Yes, it
excellent, excellent points, Richard. And thank you so much for your willingness to share that with us.
My pleasure.
Mm-hmm. Agree.
Is there anybody else that would like to ask a question or? No?
I would just say, share something that this brings up. One of our administrators posted, last year, I think it was a post about, you're not your disease.
Right.
And tell me more about what you did before you got myositis. We had over 300 responses to that question. And what we learned about our group is that just exactly that we're doctors, we're lawyers, we're utility linemen. I'm just trying to think of everything that was out there. We're geologists, petroleum engineers, finance people, artists. Yes, artists, creative, singers in theater, mothers, fathers, everything. And every one of us was living a life of meaning and fulfillment. And it doesn't stop just because we have myositis. And if you want the place where you can have some control, go back to where you were before. You still have that mind. You still are that passionate, those skills. And that's where you can apply some of this.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's, that's something that we always try to talk about is adapting. How can we adapt? There's, as you know, with myositis, there's, the different forms. So especially with IBM, since it is a continual progression, and there's really no chance of a remission right now because there's no treatment, adapting to mobility losses, those types of things, grieving those losses are, so important. And then, like you said, I don't know if there's a way to forgive a disease, but maybe a situation. Excellent point, Lynn. Just kind of use your skills to do what Richard said, to volunteer. Those are some things that, you might not be able to work full time anymore, but at least you can, volunteer those same things that you loved for a couple hours a week or something. So,
well, to Lynn's point, I would suggest one of the things that's been helpful to me. I've been I was a teacher and a guidance counselor, but that entire time that I was doing that, my wife and I had a band for 47 years, and we finally retired about 5 years ago, and I found that I was missing it. But and I got into another band, but lugging the equipment was particularly difficult. So my wife was my savior. She came to my rescue. And so the point I'm trying to make, sometimes you can modify things and you can get lucky and somebody will come and help you. In my case, it was my lovely wife that rescued me, so that I'm still continuing to rock and roll on some weekends during the year. And it's a great thing. I'm a drummer, so it's a very physical job, but I can still do it. I'm not the drummer that I once was, but I still cherish all those wonderful memories and continue to do the best that I can. And the one thing that it does, it brings joy to my heart, even though it's at a lesser level. I'm nevertheless having a great time, and I'm just going to continue until I can't do it, or my wife says I'm not going to do this anymore for you. And but she is singing a little bit, so that's one of the benefits that came out of it too. So that's been a good thing. But I think if we can modify and do the things that we love to do, even my point is you can't do them with the quality, the intensity that we once could. We can still do them in a modified manner and just not accept defeat, but move forward, whatever it takes.
Exactly. Love that.
Yes, excellent. Thank you, Richard. Jen was sharing how she's volunteering and reading to a blind friend. So that's awesome, Jan. Yeah. Thank you for doing that. It's just amazing. People are so kind if you give them a chance. So, Janet, do you have any final words that you would like to share with us? Or
I just want to wish you all the best. I know it's a real challenge to live with this disease, but I just am encouraged by what you all have said, and I wish you the best. And not only forgiveness, but also, as Richard said, just being able to modify and move on and find your purpose and your meaning and what makes you happy day to day.
Great. Well, we certainly thank you for your time and for an excellent presentation. And we, you're invited back anytime. Just let us know.
Jerry, we'll talk, because I'll be happy to come back with a different topic.
Awesome. Really appreciate it.
Thank you.
All right, Janet, thank you again so much for your time.
You're
Take good care.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye-bye.
Thanks
Bye-bye.
everyone for attending.